أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين أما بعد. What are your rights as a student in school? What can you do when it comes to advocating for the Palestinian cause? What clothing can you wear on school campuses? Also, can you pass out flyers? Can you participate in walkouts? Can you talk to your friends about the crisis happening in Palestine? In this episode, I'm going to talk about a lot of these different perspectives that are happening out there that students need to know, along with using a case study, which is the Plano Independent School District here in Dallas, Texas. Just yesterday, Plano ISD sent out a letter to all of their members in order to talk to them about a digital flyer that was sent out. The digital flyer that was sent out basically encouraged students to dress for Palestine on October the 25th, which is today. The idea is for students to dress for Palestine, show their solidarity and support, and to, of course, maybe start conversation with other students to educate them about the Palestinian cause and the issue. The letter reads as following. Last week, we were made aware of a digital flyer circulating on social media that promotes a Dress for Palestine Day on October the 25th. We have been unable to identify the source of the flyer as it does not appear to originate from any Plano ISD student group. Plano ISD does not support, promote, encourage, or sponsor any student demonstrations as we work to develop global citizens. We want to ensure all students are cognizant of the way that actions and symbols may affect their classmates in a time of grief and fear. Well, let's break that down a little bit. What this letter is saying, because there's a lot of confusion about this, but this is the basic standard approach that many school districts across the country, including here in Texas, are taking. Their first stance is that they do not support one group or the other. They don't support any demonstration. They don't encourage students to participate in demonstration. Why? Because, well, their excuse is that they're an educational institution. They don't want to get involved in that. And maybe that's potentially the best approach as it is right now. It's much better than being what we see come from government officials, which is that they support Israel, they support Israel's war, they support Israel's ethnic cleansing and genocide. At least they're not saying that. But what they're saying is that they've heard about this letter, addressed for Palestine Day on October 25th, and they're going to talk about what their stance is on that participation, what students should know about their rights and things of that nature. So let's continue and see what else that letter says. It goes on to saying, however, we ask that you take a moment to discuss with your child that members of our community may view wearing certain clothing or using certain language as threatening. We ask that you encourage your child to be sensitive to others and behave in a way that supports the safety and well-being of our community as a whole. Well, if you take this portion of it, it is encouraging parents to talk to their children about how the clothing they wear can affect other students on campus. And that is true, especially if the Palestinian-Israeli cause. If students go wearing Palestinian clothing or the hatta or different things like that, the kafia, that might be perceived by some students as potentially threatening or things like that. And of course, the reverse is true if Jewish students or other students wore, let's say, an Israeli flag on campus as well. The challenges that I want to address to all of you is that one thing to understand about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is that complacency, not talking about this issue, the status quo benefits the oppressor. Every day that Palestine is illegally occupied according to international law, more illegal settlements are being built. Every day that goes by, less and less food and water is available for those suffering in the Gaza Strip. More Palestinians in Gaza are being bombed and destroyed. More churches, mosques, and essential areas such as schools and other areas are being destroyed and devastated. So of course, for the oppressor, the one who is causing this occupation, causing this miserable condition, they benefit from the status quo. They would love nothing more than for nobody to wear their clothing or nobody to bring up this conversation because they're already in a position of power. Obviously, the ones who want to change that perception and educate others are the people on our side who are advocating for the Palestinian cause on the right side of history. So this language is really not targeting the other side. It really is targeting our side. Let's go back to the letter for a little bit. It's important to note that we are bound by the First Amendment to respect and honor students' rights to express themselves as long as that expression does not cause a substantial disruption, again, substantial disruption to the school environment or pose a threat to the safety of our students. This is the important language here. Plano ISD, along with every ISD in Texas, is bound by the Constitution and the law of the land. Every school district in the whole country is bound by the Constitution and the law of the land. And the law of the land allows for students to come express their political views, practice their religion. Also, it allows them to educate their classmates about perception that they have. It allows them to participate in First Amendment protected speech, such as walkouts on campus and other activities as well. So this section of the letter is actually very positive. It's saying that Plano ISD respects and is bounded by the First Amendment and will respect and honor students' right to express themselves. Meaning that if you want to wear Palestinian clothing, if you want to wear the kufaya, if you want to wear these other clothing, you have the right to do so under specific parameters and regulations. What are those parameters? Well, very simple. You cannot cause the language's substantial disruption to the school environment or pose a threat to the safety of other students. I mean, if you're going to wear this clothing, you can wear it passively. However, if you then wear this clothing and you go into a class and you start disrupting the class, or you start shouting in class, or you take other types of action like this, that becomes disruptive. That becomes really something that's not going to be protected, and that the school has the right to kick you out of the class, send you to the principal, and take other action as well. Also, the clothing you're wearing cannot pose a threat to other students or the safety of other students. Meaning that the language, if you have any shirts that have language on it, it cannot be threatening or imposing an unsafe environment for other students. Other than that, though, Plano ISD really here is saying you have the right to participate, you have the right to express yourself, as long as it's in these parameters. Let's continue and figure out more what's being done. What does it mean about disruption, or what does it mean about threatening and other things like that? Well, the Plano ISD letter continues, and this is similar to other schools as well. Number one, you cannot use inappropriate language. You cannot go to school, curse somebody out. You cannot go to school, yell and threaten other students. You cannot go to school and have a shirt that threatens other people or insults other people as well. That cannot be done. Number two, you cannot target a group of individuals at the school or any related school activities. So whether you're in school or you're at a football game, a basketball game, after school activities, any of these places, this rule still applies. Outside of these areas, well, you have much more freedom to express yourself, but in these areas, you have to be bound by that as well. What does it mean by specific language? Well, this language includes race. You cannot target people's race. You cannot target their ethnicity, gender, disability, or religious beliefs. So if you're going to wear these clothing, if you're going to take a moral political stance, you should do so. Don't cause a substantial disturbance in school. And of course, don't be insulted to another group of people or another religious group of people. You want to be bound by that as well. You want to engage in any conduct that the school officials might reasonably believe will sustainably disrupt the school program or incite violence. You cannot engage in any of that type of conduct. You have to be moral, you have to be civil about it, and you have to be, of course, brave and be able to share your perspective as well. Let's continue to talk about the clothing with this, because this is what Plano ISD clothing. The district prohibits any clothing or grooming that the principal may reasonably believe will materially and substantially interfere with the operation of a school or cause a material or substantial disruption. So what does this mean? This is where vague language starts coming in. So the district is going to prohibit any clothing or grooming. Who's the person that gets to decide? Well, ultimately, it's the principal of Plano ISD, its specific schools. The principal can come in and then they can make a determination and a decision whether one piece of clothing causes, quote unquote, materially substantial interfere with the operation of the school, or it doesn't. However, we have to understand that if your kids are just wearing a kafaya or wearing Palestinian clothing or something of that nature, does that actually meet the threshold of substantially interfere with the operation of school? Probably not. Now, if you're wearing this clothing and then you go into a classroom and then all the kids keep asking you questions about it, which is fantastic, but then it's interfering with class time, then maybe they could do that. If you're wearing this clothing in order to confront other students who might be on the opposite end, then definitely that could be an opportunity for the principal to come in. The main portion is that the principal really has a lot of leeway and power. The principal have been trained according to Plano ISD letter as it continues, so hopefully they won't take action that are beyond what reasonably believe. But that is where it comes in. if your principal does tell you something, or if a teacher tells you, hey, you can't wear this, you can't wear that, and you're not causing a disruption, you're not creating any issues, in fact, it's their potential bias, then that's something that you should complain to your parents about, complain to different organizations about, and really bring that up the chain, because they don't have the ability to just carte blanche of target people's First Amendment right. They have to follow certain guidelines that are put in here. Any forms of dress or grooming that attract undue attention, disrupt school, is considered gang-related, or detract from the learning process is not acceptable. Again, wearing Palestinian clothing, wearing things like that shouldn't get to that level. In some situations, it might get to that level. But again, if you're civil, if you're calm, if you're polite, if you're doing it to stand solidarity, inshallah, you shouldn't have any problems. And of course, we'll take it on a case-by-case basis with the school and with the individuals if any issues do come up. I want to reiterate this point. First Amendment. You have First Amendment protections. This is not another country. This is the United States. In the United States, you have First Amendment protections for expressing yourself, for wearing clothing, for passing out materials, and other actions. The letter continues by saying, any demonstrations, including walkouts, meaning walking out of class, walking out of school, are expected to be conducted in a manner that respects students' First Amendment rights and does not create a substantial and material disruption to learning at school or pose a threat to student safety. Again, that same language is brought up again. You have the First Amendment right. You can walk out of class. You can participate in demonstration, but it should be, and the school is going to allow you to do it while respecting First Amendment rights. As long as what? It doesn't, again, that language, substantial and material disruption to the learning at school or pose a threat to student safety, which, if you're doing it in a civil, moral manner, it shouldn't do that. The letter continues. Speech and clothing that express a particular opinion are protected to the extent that they do not, again, create substantial material disruption or threaten students. So what is it saying overall? You can wear clothing, you can pass out materials, you can participate in demonstrations, you can participate in walkouts, you can participate in all this because the school is going to protect First Amendment rights. If they don't, they will be challenged by myself and other organizations. They're allowed to do it. But the point is, you cannot cause substantial and material disruption to learning. Who ultimately determines that? Well, it's the principal of each individual school. Alhamdulillah, they've been trained, is what the letter said it in Plano ISD. So we assume that we shouldn't have any issues. But the point is, you have these rights. Take advantage of them. Speak out for the Palestinian cause. Do so bravely and morally in order to be there. Let's talk about knowing your rights as students. In general, whether it's in Texas or across the country, the First Amendment has clear protection for students. They can, just to reiterate, pass out flyers and education materials in school. They can pass out petitions. If you want to petition the government to call for a ceasefire, you want to petition the government or you want to petition the school district to not accept Governor Greg Abbott's terrible take on this crisis, you can do that as well. You can participate in petitions. You can wear expressive clothing. You have the right to do that as well. Of course, the caveat is you cannot disrupt school functions or curse or racially profile other people or threaten students. That's what the caveat is. And that is something that all of us should take into serious consideration. Now, of course, if you want to demonstrate at a school, if you want, let's say, do a protest at a school, you can do that as well. You can do a walk out of the school, go to public property, aka the sidewalk in front of the school or a park nearby the school or whatever public property there is, and you have the right to assemble there and voice your concerns. You can bring signs, you can wear flags, you can do whatever, because this is First Amendment protected speech. You do not have to get permission from anybody to engage in that speech. Number 3, you also have the right to express yourselves on social media, and the school cannot target you for your opinion on social media. Now, of course, that has extents. What are those extents? Exactly what we covered before. You cannot threaten other people at your school. You cannot create an unsafe environment. You cannot do things that are going to cause that type of disruption. Outside of that, though, if you want to say free Palestine, if you want to say I support the Palestinian cause, I call for a ceasefire, if you want to talk about Israel's indiscriminate bombing of people or targeting of mosques or schools or facilities like that, then you have every right to do that as well, and your school cannot target that or go against that as well. Again, this is something we want to make sure all students and parents understand their rights as well. Let's continue. Families and parents. This is, of course, a challenging time for all of us. Many of you might be wondering, well, what should I allow my child to do or engage in? Some of you might be worried about your children and their future. What I want to do is I want to remind all of us one thing. Number one, have an open family communication and dialogue with your children. Make sure that when you're speaking to your children, you're doing it based on facts, the law, and your rights, not based on conspiracy theories and overblown concerns that are really not merited in reality or facts or law. Sometimes as parents, we get overly concerned and we really teach our children something that A, is not accurate, and B, sometimes actually is counterintuitive. I know for many parents this might be a challenging time, but I think this is an opportunity for you to have an adult, grown-up conversation with your children and say, listen, this is our family's stance, this is our family's belief, and we will support you, our children, if you want to take a stance one way or the other. Now, of course, we have to also understand that personally for me, I would encourage parents to take a courageous stance during this time, especially if you're Muslim. Understand, the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's a seerah simply about somebody going, preaching the truth to people rejecting that truth, but then over time, the truth overtakes falsehood and it is at the end victorious. That is what we want to teach our children. Yes, if your children wear Palestinian clothing, if they pass out educational material, if they engage in this conversation, there might be some pushback. There might be other students who don't like it. There might be some potential pushback that's there. However, that our entire religion preaches, that is the point of being Muslim. That is the point of being an ambassador of Allah on this earth. That is the point of following this ummah and following the seerah and learning those lessons. What's the point of the seerah if it's not to encourage that as well? Be mindful of the seerah. Be mindful of the lessons. And I would strongly encourage parents, use this opportunity as a time of courage. Show your children how courageous you are and how that you're going to support your kids with what they're doing as long as they follow those parameters that we discussed earlier of not creating a disruptive environment and so on and so forth. Sadly, I've seen many parents who go over the bounds, who are overly cautious, and their children never forget that. Their children never forget how their parents showed real cowardness and weakness on some occasion. Now, of course, not all parents and families should participate if they don't feel comfortable doing so. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. But what I'm saying is have that conversation, discuss where you're most comfortable with, and try to be on the side of courage. Try to be on the side of moral exceptionalism. Try to be on the side of doing the right thing and trusting in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and tell your child that you're going to support them in what they do as long as they follow the specific guidelines that I've discussed here as well. Though that you're posting on social media, you should know that social media, especially right now, is taking the side of Israel and taking the side of censorship and really targeting hundreds of thousands or millions of accounts that are trying to show support of the Palestinian cause. Now, of course, that's going to diminish as time goes on, because whenever a crisis happens, social media, especially after the January 21st riots in the Capitol, they now overcompensate. I think that's going to actually die down as time goes on. However, all of you should understand that if you post on social media, be cognizant of what you're posting. It's one thing to support Palestine. It's another thing to show explicit violent images of the people who are suffering in Palestine. It is another thing to make a statement that targets another religious group or creates a carte blanche statement that really targets another religious group or people perceived to be the quote-unquote other. These are things that as Muslims we should not stand for, because Muslims have protected the Jewish community for over 100 generations throughout our entire history, except for the last 100 years with the colonizing state of Israel. However, we should not carte blanche attack another group of people, and we should not carte blanche make statements that have explicit curse words, because that can go against community standards. Show pictures that have explicit body parts or things like that, because that violates the community standards set by social media platforms. Again, we are seeing accounts being targeted and banned unjustly and unfairly, and we're also seeing accounts being targeted because what's being posted is really a bit beyond what these community standards might accept. Again, I don't care for one or the other. I'm just telling you this is how things are right now. Don't allow your account to be shadow banned or suspended simply because you posted something in a fit of anger or rage. And this is something we especially have to talk to young people about. Young people who see what's happening, they don't have full life experience. They might go on social media like, I don't care what anybody thinks. I don't care what people say. Post something that really goes against their religion, is done in a fit of anger, and that really harms them. There are groups like Canary Mission that are out there that are vile, venomous, vicious groups that are completely disgusting. And what they do is they actively target these kids. They find one tweet, one quote, one something, they put on their website, overblow it, and then they basically tarnish that person's reputation, and they try to get them not hired for the rest of their life. Don't give these trash websites like Canary Mission any ammunition. Advocate for the Palestinian cause morally, justly, unapologetically, but then also be aware of what you're saying, and then make sure that you're not saying that it goes against your religion. Especially, I remind all of us in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "O you who believe, stand up firmly for justice as witnesses with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if it is against yourselves, your parents, your closest of kin, and whether it be against the rich or the poor, for Allah can best protect both." So let's remember this as we go forward. A few other know your rights. Protesting. You have the right, a First Amendment right, to peacefully assemble and protest, especially on public property. You do not need a permit. You do not need permission. You can be kicked out of private property, congressional officials' offices, private buildings, or other areas. You can be kicked off and charged for trespassing. So be mindful of that. You should also be mindful of noise ordinances. You might have the right to protest, but maybe they have a noise ordinance. You can't use a large megaphone or something in a certain area. Mindful of traffic. Don't block street traffic or sidewalk traffic. Allow there to be a right of way for people to get past you. Of course, if you have a larger demonstration, then of course there's different rules. You can work with local law enforcement. You can get a permit, or if you have a large enough group, honestly, de facto, you can just go on the streets and it seems like you're able to block traffic. And the police should work with you in order to redirect traffic around yourselves. But just be aware of that as much as you can. Again, communication is important for having a peaceful demonstration and protest. We are hearing a lot of cases of bullying and harassment. If your child is bullied, if your child is targeted, do not stay quiet. Document the bullying, find help, get your parents involved, get the teacher involved, get the administrator involved, and then also feel free to reach out to other organizations that are out there who are advocating for the Palestinian cause. Be brave and speak out for justice. You might get some pushback, but the pushback you're getting may or may not be bullying. There might just be actual questions or ignorant, or people just don't know what's happening, so they might ask you a question. As people who are advocating for this cause, be patient, be brave, speak out for justice. And of course, if it does become harassment, if it becomes something that somebody is actively targeting you for your stance or for your religion, for your belief, speak out against it. Online harassment is also very common. If you're being harassed online, there's different approaches. The first approach is, of course, if it's verbal online, if it's written and it's not threatening, report it to the whatever service you're on. They have community guidelines standard. They should remove that post. They should also maybe potentially ban that account. If someone in real life is trying to expose you or target you, document it, especially if you know the person, and then of course report it not only on social media, but report it to your school if it's another student or something like that. If there are random people out there, and there's a lot of bots out there, basically accounts are just created to harass people, simply delete it, block it, and move on. Don't focus your time on the haters out there. Focus your efforts on how are you going to make a fundamental change happen for this cause. In conclusion, all of us should have hope. All of us should not lose hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who reminds all of us that Allah is the one who is on the side of the oppressed. Allah does not allow oppression to happen forever. Allah knows the names of every single person who is the victim of this crisis that's happening. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will for sure give victory to those who stand for the truth. Allah will for sure give victory for those who stand up for themselves. And all you and I have to do is do our part, do our duty, do our due diligence, know our rights, and stand up unapologetically against genocide, against ethnic cleansing, against the illegal, brutal occupation of Palestine for the last 18 years, and stand so seeking the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the end, I want to remind all of us here about a quote from Martin Luther King, who said that the moral arm of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. That the moral arm of the universe is long, that the occupation might last for 75 years, 85 years, but it bends towards justice. Eventually, no tyrant, no tyranny, no oppression can last forever. One day, the Palestinian people will be free, their rights will be protected, and we have to do our part in that struggle. And part of that is on public schools, is on college campuses, is in these private areas, and these campuses and these areas have the obligation in the United States to protect the First Amendment, and if they don't, then there will be serious consequences for doing so. With that, I want to say Jazakallah khair for watching this. If you have any questions, reach out to me, share and like this video, and let's empower our next generation of students. Assalamu alaikum.